The nation is thriving 9 years after the Revolutionary War. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison have devised a plan to move the nation's capital from New York to Maryland and Virginia. The only issue is the opposing political party, the Federalists, who would never agree with their plan. They knew one man and one man only who could help them. This man, Alexander Hamilton, also had a plan he wanted to pass, but he needed votes to pass it. Jefferson and Madison believed that if they got representatives in their own party, the Anti-Federalists, to vote for Hamilton's plan, representatives from the Federalist Party would most likely do the same. This is the Compromise of 1790 and the start of our well-developed American government.
The Compromise of 1790, or the Dinner Table Bargain, was an event that took place June 20th, 1790, and marked the first of three great compromises between the North and South. Thomas Jefferson hosted a dinner and invited Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, backed by President George Washington. The goal of this dinner was to strike a deal with Hamilton to convince him to vote for Jefferson's plan to move the nation's capital. Moving the capital to the South, like Jefferson and Madison had planned, carried the strong implication that the North would not raise serious objections to the institution of slavery, since the capital would be in two slave states, Maryland and Virginia. This benefited Madison and Jefferson greatly, considering they were both Virginians. In turn, Hamilton was hoping to convince Jefferson and Madison, among other Southerners, to vote for his financial plan. This would give Hamilton unprecedented financial power, as well as the ability to pay off states' war debts, which would benefit his position as Secretary of Treasury greatly. Southerners at that time refused to pay off war debts, holding back Hamilton's plan for building a fiscally strong nation-state. Hamilton was the Secretary of Treasury at the time, as well as a Federalist. Jefferson was the Secretary of State, and, along with James Madison, was a Democratic. Exactly what occurred that day in Virginia. All we know is that what happened that day would change our nation forever.
Alexander Hamilton's plan would allow businesses to have loans paid off in the northern and southern states. He realized that the Southerners were upset with his proposal, especially James Madison. But if they don't wipe out the debt by the federal government, then they are not able to move forward. He proposed that the federal government assume the state's substantial Revolutionary War debts. Hamilton felt that by passing this act, it would allow our country to establish credit within the United States and then to promote investments among business owners. The South was not as fond of this as the North, but in order for the United States to succeed, they all needed to band together for the good of our country. Hamilton proposed that the federal government pay off the new bonds with revenue from a new tariff on imports. His financial plan was a three-step process. Step 1 involved paying off all war debts. At that time, our national debt had reached more than $52 million. Since the United States was a relatively new nation, they needed to gain the respect of our other nations and let them realize they would be responsible with their money. No other country would want to loan their money in the future if they realized the United States hadn't paid off their debts from the war. Hamilton had a detailed three-step process for the financial plan. Step 1. This step means paying off all war debt. They needed to gain the respect and trust from other nations. Even though the North had more debt than the South, they couldn't focus on that. Instead, as a federal government, they needed to eliminate all the debt, North and South. Step 2. They needed to place high tariffs on foreign goods such as shoes and textiles. This alone would allow them to raise government revenues due to the fact that the U.S. citizens bought these items in great quantity. That would ensure a steady flow of income to the government and allow the American industry to grow. Step 3. Hamilton wanted a national bank because he felt it would help the economy of the nation. This would allow businesses to be able to make loans and also be able to issue banknotes. The notes were essentially paper money that could be used as currency. Around the same time that Alexander Hamilton was trying to get his plan approved, there was another contested issue being decided. This was the Residence Act, which would determine where the capital would be located. Washington, D.C. was chosen, but some wanted Philadelphia, New York, or even in the South. A compromise was reached between Hamilton and James Madison. This was reached at a dinner and was called the Dinner Table Bargain. It was a private meeting that was held between Hamilton and Madison. If Madison supported Hamilton's plan, then Hamilton would support Madison's proposal to have the capital located in the South. Both plans narrowly passed with approval.
Thomas Jefferson was born on April 13, 1743, in Shadwell, Virginia. He was a draftsman of the U.S. Declaration of Independence and the nation's first Secretary of State from 1789 to 1994. He was the second Vice President from 1797 to 1801, and as the third President, 1801 to 1809. He was the statesman responsible for the Louisiana Purchase. Jefferson died in bed at Monticello, near Charlottesville, Virginia, on July 4, 1826. The Compromise of 1790 was the first of the three great compromises made by the North and South every 30 years in an attempt to keep the Union together and prevent civil war. Hamilton, Madison, and Jefferson, with the backing of Washington, arranged the terms which resulted in the passage of the Residence Act in July and the Funding Act in August. Central to the compromise was a bargain by which several Southerners agreed to change their votes and support assumption if Congress would first pass a bill locating the capital of the United States on the Potomac River after a 10-year temporary residence in Philadelphia. This carried the strong implication that the North would not raise serious objections to the institution of slavery, since the capital would be located in two slave states, Maryland and Virginia. Although political leaders knew that the differences between North and South would long plague the Union, they hoped they had found an indissoluble bond, a democratic empire fueled by Northern and financial commercial capitalism, with its capital in the agrarian slave-holding South. As the turbulent second session closed, Congressmen as well as the press urged Americans to support the compromise. During the third session, Congress passed several laws confirming its terms.
The Compromise of 1790 changed our nation forever. It showed how persuasive Alexander Hamilton was as a politician, and gave him full control of the nation's economy, shaping how it works today. Hamilton was proven to be a risk taker. He knew that giving the votes needed to move the capital to the southern states of Virginia and Maryland from his home state of New York would be controversial, but he knew that he would get what he wanted out of it in the end. So he went for it. Rather than wait for opportunities to land in his lap, he went out and made things happen. He showed that he was all for bettering this country for the future, as well as impacting his legacy as much as possible. His financial plan was a work of genius and took our country from bankruptcy to prosperity. Once Jefferson became president, who happened to be from his opposing political party, attempted to undo his financial system and replace it. He learned that doing that would be a terrible move and kept it in place. Jefferson's impact on this deal was one of the biggest accomplishments of his long and prosperous political career. This deal set the home of presidents to this day. Jefferson, like Hamilton, knew voting for the other's plan would be risky, but he took that risk. Jefferson knew that if the capital was in two slave states, slavery would continue into America's future. Jefferson, being a Virginian farmer, used slaves as his main income for the most of his life, and knew prolonging slavery would help the South prosper. He knew the only way to do that was to vote for Hamilton's deal. As Hamilton had hoped by making moves, implemented his career, he became one of America's most important founding fathers and possibly the least appreciating founding father America's ever had. Thanks to these three men of opposing political parties who founded the two-party system, who made an agreement, America is one of the world's biggest superpowers. Even though we may never know what exactly happened in that room that day, we do know we should thank these three men. These three men completely changed the American government. Thanks to Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton, American government is what it is today. Thanks to these three men, America truly is great.